All right. Welcome to Finding, Using, and Citing Sources in APA Style. During this live webinar, we are going to teach you how to find and cite sources for academic papers using the APA citation style guidelines, as well as using sources in college level writing is an essential skill, but it can be confusing when you're first learning. This webinar will give you all the information you need to help you understand the citation process and to be able to cite sources correctly and effectively. Presenting today will be Dr. Angela Francis, Associate Director for Student Success, and myself, Dr. Chandra Magru, doctoral lecturer in general education, specifically in math. Just a few bit of housekeeping rules. We want to make sure we're able to respond to all of your questions. So please post them in the appropriate places. If your question is related to the content of the webinar, please go ahead and use the Q&A feature located at the bottom of your screen. You may have to click the ellipses or the 3-dot icon to get more options to view the Q&A. If you experience any technical issues, please share those in the chat feature, which you'll also be able to find in the same menu. Lastly, we'll be launching a few polls throughout this webinar. When a poll appears, a pop-up on your screen, please take a moment to respond at that time. So here we are. So before we begin, we want to do a little survey. Please indicate how long you've been with us at CUNY SPS.
And it's always so interesting to see the mix of when people are joining us, because lots of people will join during the first or second term, but we do also see people who realize as they've been progressing in their courses that they may need a refresher or sometimes a first-time course with this. So whatever your answer, no shame.
All right, so we'll give it a few more seconds. Am I supposed to end the poll now, or?
I think the wonderful Molly has us covered.
Right.
So I believe that everyone should be able to see the results now. And it looks like we've got a good split, Chandra.
50% is their first semester, 17 is second semester, and we have a nice 33 chunk here who've been here for more than 2. Wow, that's wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. So here's a second set of polls. Please indicate whether or not you feel confident in the following things: understanding the rules of academic integrity, finding scholarly sources, directly quoting, paraphrasing, summarizing sources, and making properly formatted APA style references and in-text citations. We have some nice answers trickling in.
Mm-hmm. It's always interesting to see where people feel most or least confident. I know what I would have said. For me, it would have definitely been the APA style. And I say that as someone who taught college writing for about 10 years.
All right.
Hmm. So I think we've got almost everyone. So, Molly, if you would please share the results.
All right, so we have a nice distribution here. 95% of us are confident in understanding the rules of academic integrity. We have almost 80% confident in finding scholarly sources. I love that. And here's where we start to get into a divide. I see direct quoting, paraphrasing, and summarizing. 58 say yes, 42% say no, they're not confident. And lastly, in the implementing of APA references, as was mentioned before, there's a lot of rules in APA to go through
Mhm.
and remember. I frankly don't remember them all either, and I look them up when I need to.
Yes, I would definitely say for those of you who are feeling nervous about those references, one of the things that we'll cover here, but also that you can work with a writing consultant about, is the tools that can make life easier when you don't have room in your head for all of the specifics of APA in this case, or if you were in a different field, MLA or Chicago style citation. So there are tools that can make that easier for you without running afoul of the academic integrity policy. And we'll be able to share some of those with you today. I also thought the directly quoting, paraphrasing, and summarizing sources, that is indeed one that gets a lot of people. Um, and I also find that, for me at least, I'll speak for myself, when I was a student, I definitely felt weakest in those two areas. But then as I continued in my degree program, learned more about academic integrity and better ways to find sources that surprised me. So don't feel badly if you're not comfortable, but also if you are comfortable, hopefully we'll be able to give you some tips even still so that you walk away feeling confident, and like you learned something.
Right. So next, we will go over how, when, and why we cite sources in academic writing, focusing on how to properly cite your sources so that you avoid plagiarism. We will cover direct quoting, paraphrasing, and summarizing sources. We will define what scholarly sources are and show you how to find them. And we will demonstrate how to do citations in both your text and on the reference list at the end of your paper. Why cite? In college and graduate school, whenever you present information or ideas from a source outside of yourself, you're expected to give credit and show where you found that information. Um, there are several important reasons why having these citations in your text and on a reference list is crucial. We cite in order to help readers evaluate the arguments or claims that you're making and to legitimize those claims or inquiries. And we cite in order to provide directions on where our readers can find the same information if they want to look at it themselves. And most importantly, we want to give credit where credit is due. So if you fail to cite sources or cite them incorrectly, you may be charged with plagiarism, which is a pretty serious academic offense. The CUNY policy on academic integrity defines plagiarism as, quote, the act of presenting another person's ideas, research, or writings as your own. You can find more information about CUNY's academic integrity policy at that website, sps.cuny.edu/academic integrity. We will put the link in the chat. So what really counts as plagiarism? The CUNY academic integrity policy includes the following as examples of plagiarism: copying another person's actual words or images without the use of quotation marks and without attributing the words to their source. Number two, presenting another person's ideas or theories in your own words without acknowledging the source. Number three, internet plagiarism, including submitting downloaded term papers or parts of term papers. Number four, paraphrasing or copying information from the internet without citing the source. Five, could be cutting or pasting from various sources without proper attribution. Please note that the CUNY academic integrity policy also prohibits students from submitting the same paper or substantial portions of the same paper to more than one course without consulting each instructor. So this includes even your own work that you've written from previous semester. I know it's tempting, just avoid it at all costs.
Yes, and Chandra, that was something that got me when I was a student. I didn't realize that that would be running afoul of the policy.
Yeah, and it's very tempting because you feel, it's your work and you have every right to read, feel as if you're not plagiarizing, but yes, certainly. Um, and this full policy can be found at on the CUNY SPS website that you see there, sps.cuny.edu/academic, again, integrity. And as a special note, it is important to steer clear of websites. I'm sure we've all heard of Chegg. So, stay away from these notorious websites such as Course Hero and others. I know I can't help but laugh. I shouldn't. I'm so sorry. It is against the CUNY SPS academic policy to share syllabi, course assignments, and exams on a more serious note. So just do your best and avoid them completely. This is a violation of your faculty's intellectual property and also provides unfair advantage to future students. Additionally, it is against the academic policy to download previously posted course content from these sites. So just don't even be tempted, not worth it. And now I know on everyone's mind, what about generative AI? Because that's a pretty spicy topic these days, right? So using AI tools, and there's a range here. We might mention ChatGPT, OpenAI, Grammarly. I know there are more out there, Claude, which can help you generate ideas, find sources, and or write or edit your assignments. This also may violate the CUNY SPS academic integrity policy. So make sure you check with your instructor's policies on AI use. It could be different in each course, in each section. Unless your instructors give you explicit permission to use AI tools in specific ways in particular assignments, the CUNY-wide academic integrity policy prohibits the use of generative AI tools in your coursework. And if you're unsure, always reach out to your instructor and ask, is this permitted for this assignment? It might be the case. It could be okay for one assignment and it may not be okay for another assignment in the same course. Plagiarism, again, is a serious academic offense and can sometimes happen even when learners are not necessarily trying to steal another person's ideas. So let's just make sure you understand how not to plagiarize, and this can be done by citing properly. So when it comes to citing sources, there are several different style guides out there. A style guide dictates such things as how your paper is formatted, whether it has a cover page, how to format in-text citations, and reference list citations. Just as a note here, these rules will differ based on the style guide you are required to use. APA is the preferred style for most of the faculty here at SPS. Since this webinar was developed specifically with CUNY SPS students in mind, we are focusing only on this particular method. I believe, as was mentioned before, there's Chicago, there's MLA, I'm sure there's another one out there I can't recall. So if your professor does not specify which guide they want you to use, please make sure to ask and clarify that. APA stands for the American Psychological Association, but the guide is used in a variety of disciplines, including social, and behavioral sciences, natural sciences, nursing, communications, education, business and engineering are some of the fields that actually do require APA citations as well. So it's a pretty widely used protocol. So now that we've talked about why cite sources, let's get into the details of the different kinds of sources, how to find them, and how to cite them. Generally speaking, within academia, there are two different categories for sources: credible sources and scholarly sources. A credible source, sometimes referred to as a popular source, can refer to articles from newspapers such as the New York Times, government websites such as newyorkcity.gov, or websites of well-respected organizations such as the American Association of Nurse Practitioners. There are just a few examples of credible or popular sources, but often professors will ask you to use scholarly sources, which are also sometimes referred to as academic sources. And many scholarly sources are what's known as peer-reviewed. All these terms can be confusing at first. The gist of it is that scholarly sources are ones written by scholars, people who work in academia, and are generally published in academic journals. Now, you might say, what are peer-reviewed sources and how do you find them? So if a journal is, quote, peer-reviewed, it means that a group of scholars in a particular discipline have inspected the writing and the research closely, and they've agreed that it is suitable to be published in that particular journal. So in other words, a group of scholars working for a particular journal acts like a group of, let's say, peers or referees who determine if the writing and the research is acceptable by the discipline standards. I'm going to turn the second half of the webinar over to now my colleague, Dr. Angela Francis. And we're going to now discuss on where to find sources.
Thank you so much. And I love working on this webinar with you in particular, Chandra, because it's wonderful to have someone from a STEM field also talking about this. We often have people in one discipline discussing this, but as you can tell just from Chandra being able to tell you about this, these are rules that can impact you across your fields and in all of your courses, including mathematics. So hi, first of all, to you all. And now that we've discussed what sources are and how and why to cite them, I'm going to really focus on where to find them, and more information about how to cite them. So most academic journals are available for purchase online, but the high cost makes them inaccessible for many students. So fortunately, public libraries and most accredited colleges and universities subscribe to academic databases, and these house those journals. As a result, college and graduate students and faculty and staff have access to literally thousands of scholarly articles. This is an important benefit that your tuition helps pay for. As a CUNY student, you can access these journals, and I hope you will access these journals through the library systems database using CUNY OneSearch. And I'm going to walk you through how to get there. So students at the CUNY School of Professional Studies have access to Baruch College's Newman Library. That is our home campus library. And there's a link provided to the library website in the Brightspace navigation menu in all of your course sites. So you can see in the upper part of your course, and if you're using a tab or a screen reader that's reading everything, it will be between grades and tutoring. So you'll see library. And that is how you can access the library, Baruch College. So once you are there, you can type in your search terms on the top here. And so in this case, I tried searching for articles on nursing and the coronavirus. You'll notice that when I put my search terms in, over 15,000 results came up, and specific 15,054 results. It will say in the description if each source is peer-reviewed or not. And so you'll get information about that there as well. But that is a lot of sources to try to go through. And so that's why it's wonderful that the sidebar on the right can give you more options on how to limit your search. You can tell it to specifically look for peer-reviewed journals only. And you can also tell it to look for articles that were written during a certain time period. Depending on your topic, this can reduce the number of results you receive, sometimes significantly. As you scroll through that list of results, reading the titles and clicking on them, you can begin to read through to see what might be relevant to your project. So sometimes the articles will include abstracts, and those can give you a sense of whether or not to keep reading. Once you've found an article that seems promising, you can download a PDF, and that is listed here. Um, or you can email it to yourself, which is also helpful. There are also several different tools within OneSearch, including a tool that can help you do the citation for you and for your reference list. And so you can see information here for some of that. You can look at the quotation marks right here specifically to see citation. If you were to click on that, it would give you an option to choose APA citation style, and it would put the citation for the reference list together for you so that you would only need to copy and paste it into the end of your paper. But I'll tell you more about reference lists shortly. So let's say you've used OneSearch or any of the other databases, and you've found all of the sources that you're going to incorporate into your paper. Once you've done that, it's time to give citations for each source that you use. So citations are specific information that you are required to provide in order to help your reader know exactly where your information came from. There are 4 situations where it's important to cite your sources. First is when you quote. Second is when you paraphrase. Third is when you summarize. And lastly, fourth is when you mention factual information that you have to look up. And now we'll go through each of those in more detail. So let's start by talking about how to do proper in-text citations. Remember, in this presentation, we're focusing on the most recent version of APA style, the 7th edition. It was released in October of 2019. And I mention that because if you are required to use any of the other styles that Chandra mentioned earlier, you'll want to make sure, particularly when using that citation tool, to choose the proper citation style for your course and your assignment. So the first type of situation that requires citation is any kind of direct quotation. That means any verbatim use of a source. For direct quotes, APA generally stipulates that you must provide a page number. So, here's an example of what an in-text citation of a direct quote might look like. Note this first example is one where the author's name is used in the signal phrase. So you can see the last name here and the year claims that, and this is considered the signal phrase. And then it says the quotation, approximately 70% of US healthcare organizations use social media as part of various community engagement activities. It ends the quotation with a closed quotation mark, and in parentheses, it says P dot and the page numbers, in this case, 245. And I do want to pause just to note one little thing that I notice students sometimes miss. When you have parenthetical citation at the end, like you do here, notice that the period goes at the end of the citation rather than within the quotation. So here's another example using the same quotation, but in this case, the author's name is not used in the signal phrase. Instead, it appears at the end of the parentheses. So here you can see it says, research has found that, quote, approximately 70% of US healthcare organizations use social media as part of community engagement activities. The quote end, so there's a closed quotation mark. And now within the parentheses, you have the last name of the author, comma, the year, comma, and the page number, close parentheses with the period at the end. So note the formatting of the page number. You simply put the letter P like Peter, and then a period, followed by the page number with a space in between. Both of these examples are appropriate, so you can choose whichever one you would like, whether you would like to have the author's name in the sentence, like in the first example, or in the parentheses, like the second. Best way to decide is really to think about which one reads better.
I have a question, Angela.
Of course.
Could you say possibly the researcher's name states on page blah, 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 and then put the quote as well and not use parenthetical in that case?
While I would say that it would not be plagiarism to do that, so you wouldn't be marked for academic dishonesty, it would be an abnormal way of using APA. So it would be a situation where I'd say it's not quite the standard style, but I would be surprised if a professor would say this is plagiarism because you're clearly providing the location where the information could be used. That's a great question. Thank you. So in that case, if someone was grading your work based on how closely you adhered to APA style, you might be dinged a little bit, but you would not be marked as violating the academic integrity policy, which can have much stronger sanctions or impacts on your grade.
Thanks.
Thank you for asking that. I don't think I've ever actually been asked that question before, and now I wish I had. So let's talk some more about direct quotations because let's talk about what to do if there is no page number. And in this case, if a book or an article doesn't have a page number, like something that's online or an online news article, you're going to use the paragraph number instead. So, for example, if you look at this New York Times article, if I wanted to do a direct quotation of the text that's highlighted in yellow, and it reads considerable and compelling evidence that exercise alters our risks of developing or dying from malignancies. That's what's highlighted in yellow here. I would count the paragraph number that it showed up in, which looks to be the second paragraph of this article. Now, note how you'd format this because you can see that it is within the same sort of parentheses after the quotation, but rather than a P and then a period, you write out para, P-A-R-A, period. And then you put the number of the paragraph with a space in between. And you can also note that in this case, I've inserted the author's name and the year of when the article was published at the top. So that's part of the signal phrase. So you can see even when you don't have the page number, the overall style is the same. However, what if you have a long quotation? If you want to quote a long block of text, this is where the format changes. If the text that you're quoting is 40 words or longer, then you need to use block formatting. What you can see on the screen here is actually just called a block quote or a block quotation. So notice there are no quotation marks here. Instead of adding quotation marks, you put the quotation as an indented format, like you can see in the example on the screen here. Also, note the formatting of the page number, because where I told you that the paragraph came not within the quotation marks before, but at the end of the parentheses, when you're using a block quote, you put the period, at the end of the quotation. So in this case, after the word approaches, then you have the parenthetical citation at the end, and there's no punctuation after the close parentheses. This was something that threw me when I was working on it, and I was learning the style. So it's a little thing, but once you get used to it, it'll get easier. And then just note that after the block quotation, you have a new line, and you continue the rest of your paragraph here. If this would all have been in one paragraph, you just don't have a new indent. So notice that this is not indented. That's because it's continuing the previous paragraph of your writing. Now, let's talk about the second situation where you might use in-text citation, and that's when you paraphrase.
Before we go forward, I think we have some questions regarding um, why does the paragraph page number go at the end, or is that how it's formatted?
That is indeed how it's formatted. So, the way that I think about it, and this, I can't pretend to know why the people who designed APA style designed it this way. But the way that I think about it is the information that I need to vet the source and its usefulness might come first. So that could be the author, that could be the journal article or the title of the article. That could also be the year. All of those things help me as your reader really understand the framework of where you're quoting from. The page is good for me after I've read your quotation, because now that I've read it, I know if I want to read more. And so at that point, that's when knowing the page number is really helpful. So I can't promise that that was the thinking behind the style. But what is interesting is I was raised up academically thinking about MLA style, and that also tends to put the page number at the end. So I can only guess that it might be because of something like that.
And we have a second question from Jared. What if I'm quoting from an online lecture video? Since there are no page paragraph numbers, does there need to be any reference point other than the author and year?
Mhm. Yes, let's pause that one because I want to make sure that we cover text first. But if we do not cover it in this presentation, I will make sure that I show you exactly where to go to. You've got a couple of options for places that will show you both how to cite things like YouTube videos or in the olden days, because like videotapes, things of that nature. The way that you cite video resources sometimes depends on where you get them. So I do want to make sure not to oversimplify. So I'll cover this first and we will return to that question. So let's just talk about the second situation where you might need an in-text citation, regardless of source type. So this does still impact what you would do if you were citing a video. But the second type is when you are paraphrasing. And what I've noticed as someone who's helped both teach and tutor students in writing is that sometimes we aren't quite sure when we are paraphrasing fully. Because paraphrasing means to present or restate information in your own words. The in-text citation for paraphrased information according to APA does not require a page number, which is why it's so important to make sure you paraphrase properly. So you can see an example on the screen of what paraphrase citations in the text might look like. In this case, it says research by Wegner and Petty, and then in parentheses the year 1994, supports the claim that webinars are boring. Hopefully, this is not terribly boring. But either way, it is important to note that APA recommends using paraphrasing more than you actually direct quote your sources. If your paper has too many quotations or direct quotations from other sources, your own voice is likely to get lost and the flow of your paper may suffer. So try not to use too many direct quotations in your writing. It's best to save them for when you want to provide an exact definition or when you want to address the exact wording of the original source. If you are someone who works best with metaphors, the way that I used to think about it for myself was that I am the lead singer. I'm the Mariah Carey, I wish. And my quotations, my sources are the background singers. So they're there to support me. They're there to make my song, in this case, my essay, sound better and make it more powerful, more reliable. But at no point should they overtake my own voice. So if you're looking at a paragraph and you're noticing quotes everywhere and less of your own writing, really ask yourself, is the wording of this quotation important? Or is this a situation where I'm nervous that I can't write this as well? If the wording is important, that's a good time to use a direct quote. But if this is a situation where you're nervous about your own writing ability and the wording is not important, that's a good time to work with someone, either a peer or a tutor, or to stop off in your professor's office hours. So, as is probably clear from what I just said, we recognize that paraphrasing can indeed be a challenge, and particularly challenging aspect of writing for many students. And so let's pause to explore it a little bit more. Let's pretend that you found this research article and you want to paraphrase this section of the article. So I'll read what's on the screen. Says cyber vetting or hiring managers' attempts to assess applicants' qualifications based on social media profiles has become an inevitable reality of personnel selection. However, research suggests that assessments based on personal social media, such as Facebook, raises legal and ethical issues and offers limited predictive power. Now let's look at a few attempts to paraphrase this passage. I want you to all take a careful look at each attempt and tell me if you think it's sufficiently paraphrased. So I'll read this attempt at paraphrasing. It says, cyber vetting, which uh, refers to hiring managers' attempts to assess applicants' qualifications based on social media profiles, is an inevitable reality, but research suggests that social media-based assessments raise legal and ethical value issues and provide limited predictive power. Then in parentheses, it has the names of the authors, a comma, and the year, close parentheses, and a period. So pretend that this is another student's writing. Do you think that this was sufficiently paraphrased? So in other words, do you think that this other student properly rewrote the original passage in their own words? And I see we actually have a good number of people so far. I'll give you just a little bit longer. All right. 5-second warning. Okay. So let's see. We have a split. About 71% said no, 29 said yes. And the answer in this case is no. So the language in this sentence is actually very similar to the original passage. And you can see that even just in the beginning, right? So if you compare the two, both begin with similar structure and are using just a couple of words that are replaced. Or so in this case, the addition of the word which refers to rather than or, right? That's the replacement. But you can then really see the words from the original here in the paraphrase. So remember that when you're paraphrasing, it's very important that you write using your own words. Even if you cited the original authors, you can still face academic integrity issues if you don't sufficiently paraphrase. And in this case, the problem would be that because this is not fully in the student's own words and there are no quotation marks, the student wouldn't be citing the original author or crediting the author with the particular words that the original author used. Let's look at another one. So here's another example of an attempt at trying to paraphrase that same passage. So here's our next one, and I'll read this out loud. It says the names, Rulin and Levashina, in parentheses, the year 2018, state that engaging in cyber vetting or assessing applicants' qualifications through social media networks has become an unavoidable truth of employee selection. But studies propose that evaluations based on private social networks, including Facebook, uh, solicit lawful and moral issues and provide restricted prognostic capability. So please vote in this poll. Do you think that this is sufficient paraphrasing? And I'll give those of you who are still thinking about it, look at the words and the structure of the sentences. So can you, if you look at the paraphrase, see the original in it? If the answer is yes, then it may be a questionable paraphrase. If it seems different, then it's fine. All right, let's see. I think we have another split. So this time we have 78% who say yes, this is sufficient paraphrasing, and 22% who say no, this is not sufficient. And in this case, the answer is, drum roll, no. So in this case, the issue is not the words. Words in more cases were changed, but the sentence structure is still very similar to the original passage. So simply using a thesaurus or in more modern times, something like Grammarly, to find synonyms of the original words will still be considered insufficient paraphrasing. And this too can lead to potential academic integrity issues. So again, please be very mindful. You want to change both the words, but also the very structure of the sentence. We'll do one more example. So again, we're looking at that same initial source, and I'll read it one more time. Cyber vetting or hiring managers' attempts to assess applicants' qualifications based on social media profiles has become an inevitable reality of personnel selection. However, research suggests that assessments based on personal social media, such as Facebook, raises legal and ethical issues and offers limited predictive power. So here is a third example of an attempt at paraphrasing this passage. This one says, although hiring managers often evaluate the social media profiles of job applicants, this practice likely does not offer any benefits to companies and might even violate legal and ethical standards. And then in parentheses, it says the names of the authors, a comma, and the year, close parentheses, and a period. So, is this one sufficient paraphrasing? Remember to look at both the words being used and also the sentence structure itself.
We have a Q&A in the meantime, or I don't know if you wanted to leave that for the end, Angela.
Thank you. So this is a great question. So indeed, the idea is that when you are paraphrasing, you are rewriting a sentence. Um, and we're going to cover summaries next, but I'll give you a simple guideline, essentially a paraphrase You aren't deliberately trying to cover a lot of ground. So your paraphrase and the original quotation may be around the same length. Whereas with a summary, you may be trying to put an entire chapter in your own words in a sentence or two. But both a paraphrase and a summary, you are replacing the entire sentence with your own words. Thank you for that question. And let's see how you all voted in the poll. We have much less of a split here. 91% of you said yes, this is sufficient, and 9% of you said no. And the answer in this case is yes. So, congratulations to this student friend of ours, because in this case, the student successfully conveyed the idea of the original passage using their own words. So, in other words, the student was able to communicate the same idea of the original source while writing it in their own voice, or as one of our students here said, rewriting the entire sentence. So clearly, this is something that can be difficult. It's hard to know the line. And so it's something that takes practice. If you are feeling nervous about it, if you're not feeling secure in just how much you need to do to have it be a complete paraphrase, that is a great thing to work with a writing consultant about or a tutor about. And it's also something that you should feel free to ask your professors.
Can I ask one more question on that?
Mhm.
If suppose you have a very specific keyword or something that just cannot be rephrased, is that a good candidate to direct quote just that word and then we could still insert proper citations at the end as necessary and not paraphrase in that case?
Yes. So if part of the original is important, you can indeed do a sort of mix. So for example, if for some reason um, this last part of this section of the text raises legal and ethical issues and offers limited predictive power, was something that was phrased in a way that there was just no possible way for you to rewrite it. What you
Yeah.
can do is you can actually paraphrase the rest of it and then use quotations around the part that's in the original author's words. And then when you cite it, you'll cite it like a quotation because a quotation is there. So in that case, you would need the page number. Whereas if you paraphrased everything in your own words, no page number is needed.
So
That
it kind
said,
of, hmm.
I was just
So
going to say, if you're nervous, you're like, when do I need a page number? When do I not need one? No one will be mad at you for putting a page number with a paraphrase. So if you're not sure, you can always play it safe that way, but that's the difference.
that's a great point. When in doubt, I like that.
Mhm. Yeah, it was definitely, I know for a fact that I put way more page numbers than I needed to because I just wanted to make sure. But if you do not have a quotation, just remember if you're paraphrasing, no page number is needed. And so let's talk about summarizing because summarizing is another kind where you will indeed need to have citations. And it means to provide a more concise statement of another person's thoughts or ideas in your own words. So again, still writing it all, but more concisely. So, for example, this could be a situation where it's the main point of an entire chapter, article, or book. These are cases where you're not trying to paraphrase just one sentence or one thought. Summaries, just like paraphrases, do not require a page number, which is good because sometimes you're covering a lot of pages. So let's say that you read a book written by Freud, published in 1930, and you want to summarize the main idea of the entire book in a few sentences or less, you could write something like this. Freud, in parentheses the year, 1930, argued that civilization both protects humans from discontent and is a primary source of human suffering. So that's in your own words, but you're summarizing an entire book, so there's no page number. I also then want to show you the fourth and final situation. And this is when you use factual information that isn't common knowledge. Some things are common knowledge, so we can assume that most people would know them. For example, if you say there are 50 states in the United States, you don't need to cite that. Likewise, something that we sometimes see is people citing a dictionary definition in their introduction. You often don't need to cite those. So if you see yourself citing a dictionary that's assigned, you probably have an unnecessary citation. Some things, like statistics, however, you would have to look up. And if you have to look it up in that situation, you do want a citation that shows where you got the information from. So you can see as an example, quote, and there are no quotation marks here, but I'm quoting the example. In 2019, there were 17.4 million veterans in the United States. And then in parentheses, you can see where I got that information from. So it's the US Census Bureau that's taking the place of an individual author's name, then a comma and the year 2020. So one important point about in-text citations is that how you format them differs depending on the number of articles that your source has. So if your source just has one author, then you simply list that author's name and year. Notice that if I'm showing two sets of examples here, such as a narrative format and the parenthetical format, so this is when you're using a signal phrase. This is when you're putting everything in the citation after the quotation. Um, so the narrative format inserts the author as part of the sentence with the date of publication in the parentheses. You can use either option. If your source has two authors, then you would list both names. In parenthetical format, you would use an ampersand, that and symbol. In narrative format, you would actually write the word and. If a source has three or more authors, you would then just list the first author, and then you would use et al, et space al period, excuse me, al period. That means and others. Some sources can have dozens, if not over 100 authors. So using this makes your life easier instead of needing to write out every author's name in the text. So, um, someone earlier asked, what about something like if you're writing or citing a video, something that was said then? Looking at the time, I don't think we're going to have time to go specifically into all of the details, but you can use the Excelsior Online Writing Lab or sometimes the Excelsior OWL. This can provide you with information about how to cite various types of sources. Um, and so you can see in this case, there's APA in text, and if you were to click that, it would show you how to cite sources, including videos, or audio, or YouTube in particular. Another one that we don't have on the page here, if you prefer it, is the Purdue Online Writing Lab. They have the exact same information, so go ahead and look at both and see which one you like most. We do want to talk a bit about AI. And let me see if I can answer this question briefly. When you paraphrase a sentence, is it only one sentence? Often it will be, but you're not limited. So if your paraphrase is more than one sentence, that's okay. So you're not limited in that way. So I'm going to move a bit quickly here because I want to make sure to turn this back over to Chandra to end. But if you use an AI chatbot, you should, well, we said earlier, you should not use generative AI for writing your work unless your professor has given you explicit permission to do so. If your instructor does give you permission, remember that you need to cite the generative AI, so Chat, Claude, Grok, Perplexity, any of those. You need to cite that as a source when you use its ideas and quote it when you use its words, as per the rules of APA style. Essentially, you need to treat it like a person. The APA style blog has a lot to say about whether or not you should use AI in your writing. And we've included their three-part series of posts in the handout that we'll provide you after this event. In addition to having in-text citations, APA format also requires you have a references section at the end of your paper. So again, I'm going to move quickly, but we'll make sure we give you this as a handout. So note that if you include a citation in the text, it has to appear in the references list too. And if you include a source in the reference list, it must also appear in the text somewhere. So nothing in references that isn't in the body of your essay, and vice versa. So for example, you can see that in the paper, I cited Herbert et al. In the text, and that means I should have a corresponding citation in my references section at the end of the paper. If Herbert et al., in parentheses, 2018, was included in the body of the text, but not the references section, that would be an issue. So again, make sure that all of your in-text citations and references are accounted for. I'm going to go very quickly here and really focus just on the main one. But you will see that there are specifics for how to format references for various types of sources. Articles from research journals, books, and articles from websites are often the ones you'll use the most. You may actually memorize it. And I apologize if you can hear an alarm. But there are many other types that you might potentially cite, and each has rules for how to do so. So you can see specific examples both by going to that online writing lab and the APA style guide at apastyle.apa.org. So first is that research journal article. And Molly, can you give me a time check? Are we supposed to stop right at 7?
I believe so around then.
All
But if you
right,
take as
so
much time as you need to.
I will cover this one in depth and then go quickly. So this is an example of a research journal article. These, again, are what you might hear of as peer-reviewed or scholarly sources. And so first you start with the names of the author and articles. You write out the last name and the middle initial, and as well as the first initial. Note where the commas and periods go in this example. So they separate the names. Then you would have the publication year in parentheses. Then you would add the title of the article. And when you're writing the title, don't capitalize every word. You capitalize only the first word. And the first word after any colons or question marks and any proper nouns. But any other words should be lowercase. After the title, you will insert the name of the journal, where the article came from in italics. So in this case, personnel psychology is the journal name, and the journal article name is linked in as a new selection method, psychological properties, and assessment approach. Next is the volume and issue number of the journal. The volume number is written in italics, and the issue number is written inside of parentheses. And after all of that, you add the page numbers of the article before at the end, inserting the DOI for the journal article. This is the digital object identifier. So think of it like a unique barcode for your journal articles. Each one has one, and it's the only one with it. So you can notice that a book has very similar format or structure. You start with the author, last name and initials. You then have the year in parentheses. In this case, the book title is italicized because it's basically filling the same space as the journal title. You capitalize proper nouns, so you use the same rules of capitalization as before. And then at the end, you include the publisher of the book. Let's talk about an article from a website. So if you wanted to cite a New York Times article, as usual, you would start with the author's last name and initials. You then would have the date. In this case, you would have the year followed by the month and the day. So not only the year. Then you would have the title of the article. And just like with a peer-reviewed article, you would capitalize only the first word and first letter after any colons, as well as proper nouns. You would have the name of the website in italics. So in this case, New York Times. And you would end with the URL where you found it. If you're citing the references, the key things to keep in mind, make sure your references page starts on a new page at the very end of your paper. So don't just have a couple of line breaks. You would want to arrange them alphabetically by the author, the first author's last name. So you can see Freud is at the top, Reynolds is in the middle. The US Census Bureau is treated like an author. So here it is down between R and W. Each of the references is organized with what's called a hanging indent. Basically just means that the first line is flush against your left margin and everything else is indented, generally by half an inch. So if you find that you have more specific questions about references, we will of course provide you with this handout. But again, remember that you can go to the Excelsior OWL or the Purdue OWL if you'd like, as well as the APA style. And lastly, if you have been in orientation and you've seen me there, you know I love Zotero. If you haven't, know I love Zotero. It is a free tool. It allows you to put all of your materials into a database, including your notes about those materials. And if you insert the information about the authors and where you got it, this also can help you write your references page without memorizing the style. This is a free tool. I'm a fan. I wish I had used it earlier in my education because it would have stopped me when the citation style changed. It changed editions. I had to edit every single one of my citations by hand. Was not fun with my thesis. So consider looking at this free tool, and our library actually does provide free trainings in the free tool. So there's no cost hiding either way. All right, I'm going to turn it now over to Chandra to end this for us.
Before we get on to our poll, there was two questions it looks like in the Q&A.
Ah,
Someone Alexandra asked, should we remove or keep the hyperlink?
got you. So I have kept the hyperlinks. It's never been a problem. But I'm going to make a note to make sure just in case.
And our second question from
Mhm.
Anonymous asks, how come the title of the article here isn't italicized? That must have been in reference to the example.
Got it. Thank you. So articles are never italicized, but books are. That would be why in the example, both with the peer-reviewed resource, in the journal, you saw, and I'll move back so that you can see that. All right, so here's that journal article in the peer-reviewed journal. You can see that the name of the journal is italicized. And so to differentiate that from the name of the article, we keep the article not italicized. So it is different than what you would see in text. which is why it can sometimes be confusing. In text, you'd actually have the title of an article in quotation marks. Um, and so that can be a thing to get used to. You'll notice there are no quotation marks. So to our anonymous participant, remember that books are italicized. And if I move forward, you can see here, there's no article, there's just a book. So the book is italicized. And likewise, in this case with the website takes the place of a book, especially when it's something like the New York Times. So that's italicized, but the article or chapter is not. So I hope that that helps. Thank you for pointing out those questions, Chandra.
No problem. So as we mentioned, we wanted to do another Zoom poll, and we thought it would be a great idea to survey you again on the same questions we started our webinar with. So give you a few seconds there, I guess, since we're almost at the end here. So you want to say, if you're confident now of understanding the rules of academic integrity, finding scholarly sources, directly quoting, paraphrasing, and summarizing sources, and lastly, are you confident in implementing APA references list and in-text citations?
Yes, thank you. And we so appreciate the feedback on this. But as you can tell from how easy it was to go past an hour and how much more detail we could have gone into, please do not feel badly if you still don't feel comfortable yet. There's a lot of detail, and some of this you only feel comfortable after you've done it for a while. I can say for myself, even as, again, someone who has taught this, if I haven't done it for a while, don't feel comfortable anymore. And most definitely do go to the owls. I prefer the Excelsior owl. A lot of people prefer the Purdue owl. Yeah, see,
I
Chandra,
like
I'm,
Purdue.
yeah, see, there's no wrong answer. Both of them are perfectly reliable. It's 100% about how you prefer to see the materials.
All right, so we have some results now trickling in. So it seems like 100% of us felt better about the academic rules of academic integrity, as well as finding those scholarly sources. Nice increase here, 86% direct quoting, paraphrasing, and summarizing sources. Love to see that. And a nice 77% feels comfortable implementing APA references, lists, and text citations. So I'm so happy to see that.
Indeed.
And don't forget, please remember that you can always find free tutoring help. It's available to all SPS students. There is quantitative resource tutoring as well that we offer on our end. So there's both the writing fellows as well as writing consultants, excuse me, and quantitative fellows. You can access this tutoring by going into your Brightspace course and you click on the tutoring tab on the navigation menu. It should be in all courses that you are registered for at SPS. When you
Yes.
do,
And
and
so I was
when
going to
you,
say no shame,
yeah,
please.
it's there for you. Take advantage of it. It's a really wonderful resource and place to get help when you need it. When you do see what when you do see what you'll have two options. You'll see one for tutor.com, which is you can get very specific subject help there. You'll find tutoring for most of the subjects that we offer here at SPS, as well as study skills or other computer skills. But if you click on the other option under tutoring, it will take you to information on how to schedule an appointment with the writing consultants and quantitative fellows as well. All right, and that'll take you to the WC online system. The writing consultants can help you with APA formatting or with your writing in general. We provide students with assistance at any stage of their writing, from brainstorming and planning to revisiting your drafts. And we can certainly assist writers at every level of ability, and from first-year students to graduate students. We're available 7 days a week, and you can meet with us either synchronously via video, audio, or text, or we can provide feedback asynchronously as well. You can contact us via email, as you see on the screen. That's writingfellows@sps.cuny.edu, or you can find us on the website at Oh, I haven't. backwritingfellows.commons.gc.cuny.edu. We'll put both of those in the chat for you as well.
Yes. I know that, Chandra, we were going to do a QA, but I think we covered all of the questions and the time. I just saw one other in the chat from a few minutes ago that asked about if the references on the works cited need to be in the same order as they come up in the paper. No, remember that your works cited or your references page should be alphabetical, regardless of by author's last name, regardless of when they appear in your paper. Um, but besides that, we got all of the questions.
We hope
Look
this
at that.
webinar was helpful.
Yeah.
And as you continue your mission of completing your degree here at SPS. So thank you so much for listening, and we'd be happy to, like we said, I think there's no more questions. I think we're great, good to go.
Yeah. Thank you all so much for joining us. I hope that this has been a great start of the semester. And again, as Chandra said, remember you can access tutoring in Brightspace and reach out to us here. So please have a wonderful evening and thank you. And thank you to our interpreters and to Molly from events as well for joining us and making this even better.